Fani Willis, the biggest Fani in Georgia, dismisses the felony counts against Sidney Powell. You remember Sidney Powell, talked a lot about her in the aftermath of the 2020 election. She was fighting for Donald Trump and America to show the world what a joke the entire operation was, meaning the election. But today, she took a guilty plea, and a lot of people on the left are going, oh, see, we told you so. She was a conspirator. She was an insurrectionist or whatever, and we're going to take a look at the actual charges because it is not really that. It's much different than what the original charges said and the original allegations alleged. But first, here was a waiver, and I wanted to start here by explaining that she got charged originally in a monster RICO indictment. You can see count 1 was hers and 32 through 37 were hers, all part of the monster indictment, right? Massive pages, listed a bunch of other co-defendants and so on. But what they've done is they've allowed that essentially to be dismissed, and they're replacing it with a new set of charges that we'll talk and learn more about in a minute. But this is the document that allows all of that to happen. This is what's called the waiver. And so you see this here, it says, this case is not involving a capital felony. I waive my indictment by a grand jury, and I instead allow the district, so Fani, to charge me under the Georgia law. I understand that I may enter a plea and be tried on this accusation according to the same rules as others who have been indicted by a grand jury. All right, so normally when you're charged with a crime, you get indicted or there's a direct complaint filed, but here she would have been indicted and that didn't happen. She just agrees, okay, just bring those charges. Why? Because she's going to be pleading guilty. So this is substituting the old in for the new, and we'll learn what the new charges are. But you can see right here, 19th day of October, Sidney Powell signs off on this thing, and a lot of people going, oh, this means Trump is done. Well, we'll explain why I don't think that's the case at all. Hate feeling miserable the day after drinks? I did too. Luckily, a game-changing product called ZBiotics is here to help. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for the rough next day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best the next day. That's it. Pretty easy. I wish I had this during law school. Here's how it works. They come in little bottles, very convenient. You give one a good shake, twist the top off, slam it back, and you're done. Easy. Tastes delicious, goes down smooth. I got the 6-pack, which looks like this. It comes with an instructional booklet inside that gives you more details on how to use it and how it works. A very simple twist top right here. And of course, the reminder to drink responsibly is printed on every bottle, which is always very important. And that's coming from a former criminal defense attorney. So this Halloween, pair your candy and your cocktails with ZBiotics to avoid a spooky next morning. Go to zbiotics.com/RobertG or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Robert G at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or the occasion. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/RobertG and use the code RobertG at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode. And so we'll continue on. We're going to look at how to compare and contrast these two sets of charges. Now let's dive into the comparison between the old charges and the new charges, the original RICO charges, as you can see right here. And you can see, look at all these names. Look at all these different charges. And remember that Sidney Powell was right here. Counts 1 and 32 through 37. So the big one that brought this whole thing was count 1. Remember this one? Violation of RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. Wow. Hopefully she got found guilty of that one, right? We'll see. But the others were 32 through 37, and you remember all of these. Conspiracy to commit election fraud. We're going to go through this in more detail, but just keep mental notes on these various Georgia statutes. Right now we're in 21-2603, 21-2603, 21-2574. They're going to change a little bit because the charges change. Conspiracy to commit election fraud, computer theft, conspiracy to commit computer trespass, invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to defraud the state, right? right? These were all of the original charges for Sidney Powell. As we go through all of this, we're asking ourselves this thematic question: how do these relate back to Donald Trump? Because on the left, they're going to say Sidney Powell pled guilty, and that means that all of this is like the domino that just falls right into Donald Trump. And that means he's guilty too. But does this conduct, these overt acts, to all of these things, do they actually relate back to Donald Trump? And if Sidney Powell testifies, can she testify in a manner that is in alignment with her pleading guilty? In other words, she can talk about being guilty of certain conduct, but being guilty of that conduct does not translate over to Trump. If we're Kamala Harris, we're using Venn diagrams here, they don't overlap. Okay, Sidney Powell's plea deal is in one circle, and her conduct and her criminalities in one circle, and all of the Trump allegations are in another circle. Can we keep them separated? So in the original indictment, we're going to see this, right? These were all of the various charges, and there's a ton of them. This is count one. They say that all of these people under count one, we'll see if Sidney Powell continues to be pleading guilty to that. But here, this is the name Donald Trump. This is the old indictment. So you'd say, oh, okay, they're connected, right? You can say bingo at home, or you can say MAGA or something. If you see Donald Trump and a connection. So Sidney Powell and Donald Trump, they're connected under count one. See how that works? This is the old one. But in violation of the Racketeer, Influence, and Corruption Organizations Act, blah, blah, blah. They say between these dates, all of the people were involved in a conspiracy to violate Georgia law and do all of the following things, right? Starting with Donald Trump. He's the first co-defendant, and he's the first person listed at the top of count one. So that's him. Now, and these were the original counts. So again, as grand jurors here, we find that Sidney Powell and others, Kathleen Latham, Scott Graham Hall, and Misty Hampson, with this offense, right? And here, this was involving tampering with electronic ballot markers and tabulating machines. And here, Sidney Powell entered into a contract with Sullivan Strickler and delivered payment, and they tampered with this, and so on. But you'll notice, and if I'm wrong, if I miss this, right, sometimes I get tunnel vision and I go fast, but if I'm missing a Donald Trump connection, somebody smack me digitally. But I don't see it on that one. Here we've got this one, count 33. Sidney Powell, Kathleen, conspiracy, right? So in other words, without RICO, without that first one, none of this stuff is going to matter. And we're going to see if that is charged in this new set. Here's count 33. Again, Sidney Powell, it's the same people. It's also Sullivan Strickler for the same type of conduct. We go on. Count 34. No Trumps here. It's the same set of conduct. It's just a little different permutation of a crime. And these are all serious crimes, okay? These are felonies. Commit computer theft. Whoa, that's a big deal. It's Powell, it's Latham, it's Graham Hall, it's Misty Hampton, the same thing. They're all permutations of the same thing, right? And we saw this with Michael Cohen. And just to be, just to kind of zoom out on this whole thing for a while, when you have these types of crimes, they'll charge you for everything. So let's say that subscribing to Netflix was illegal, right? Let's just say hypothetically it was. Well, they would charge you with the crime for like visiting the website, like solicitation. Then they would actually, for signing up, right? It'd be illegal contract, trafficking in illegal goods, whatever they'd come up with, across state lines, wherever they're looking, whatever. And then every single transaction, every monthly recurring thing, you'd get an invoice, that would be a crime from Netflix, from sending you a bill for an illegal service, and then you'd pay it, and then that would be an illegal payment, and everything, felony, 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 every month, right? That type of thing. So here, it's the same thing. So they're saying that, they signed a contract, then they paid for it, then they entered into an agreement, then they were going to do all the things. Here's count 35, unlawfully conspired to use it. Okay, so they hired them, then they were going to go get it, then they were going to use it after they got it. Wow. Count 36. But again, these are all felonies, right? Invasion of computer privacy. Then they were going to use a computer to examine voter data, which is a separate crime. So they were going to get it, then they were going to use it, then they were going to use it to access voter data, which is another crime. And then 37, the final count for Sidney and the rest of these people, is to commit theft of voter data, which is a separate crime, right? So it's all very, very closely related to just one set of circumstances, like one contract, they sign it, they pay for it, they plan it, then they pick it up, then they use it, and in the use of it, it involved other things, and so criminal every single time, right? But look, and hopefully I didn't miss anything, but we're done with all the original counts. 37 is now done, and we still see the same people. Not a single one involving Donald Trump, right? Now, what's curious about this is that would be a total of 7 counts. So 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, plus 1 is originally a total of 7 counts. Now, something happened. We they have shifted. Now the new plea deal is 6 counts. Oh, weird. And they're different counts as well, as we're going to show. So take a look here. And actually, let's just put these side by side so we can just see the different numbers. Yes. Okay. So this is the old counts and these are the new counts. And if you just match the two numbers up, they're totally different statutes and totally different crimes. So 21-2-597, as we can see here, is a misdemeanor count. And this is the one that has replaced all of the original charges. All right. Just so we can see. 21-2-597 is the second half of each one of these new counts. So it's 16-4-8. It's 6 counts of the same type of crime. 16-4-8, 21-2-597, all the way down, times 6. So it's the same thing times 6. And the official crime is conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties. And the 16-4-8 is a just generic conspiracy charge, right? That's it. It's just like any type of conspiracy. It says a person commits the offense of conspiracy when together with one or more persons, any overt act to affect the object of the conspiracy. And here it says some of the penalties, which we'll fast forward through because the judge sentenced her. So that's just generic conspiracy, can apply to basically anything for whatever. This is the actual charge. Okay, now this is the misdemeanor election interference charge, and it is a misdemeanor. You can see it's 21-2597. It says a person who intentionally interferes with, hinders, or delays, or attempts to interfere, right? It could even be an attempt, so not actual, to interfere with, hinder, or delay, or otherwise in the performance of an act, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So what we have now are 7 felonies that have all been turned into misdemeanors, and one of them has been dismissed because you'll notice this count, the RICO Act, which is the only one in the original indictment that connected Sidney Powell to Donald Trump, she has not pleaded guilty to that. She's pleading guilty to a subset of crimes that, as far as we're going to hear, I don't know that there's any connection to Trump based on the actual charging document. It might have to do with her conduct, but not Trump's. So we'll see what is inside of it. Now, that was the original, that was the waiver, and now let's see what the inside of the document looks like, as well as this ridiculous plea form. Here we have the guilty plea proceeding. Now, let's start with the actual new document. So as I explained, they have gotten rid of the old charges. Why? Well, in my opinion, it's because they couldn't prove those, because they were much more serious charges, and they didn't have the evidence, they didn't have the facts, they didn't have the witnesses, they couldn't get it cobbled together in time, they didn't want to try the case so that Trump could see what's coming, or they would have fallen on their face. Generally speaking, last-minute plea deals, in my experience, they're either one of two things, okay? Either the government's case is very strong, and your defendant just kind of cops, okay? You're representing somebody, and they're like, we're gonna go to trial. And like, all right, man, the evidence is pretty bad about you. Are you sure you wanna do that? They've got like 10 witnesses, and they all say you did it, plus the camera. I wanna go to trial. All right, let's go. We prepare for trial. Day before trial, client calls. Guess what? Anything you can do to get that original plea deal back? Probably not, but let me try. Let me go figure it out, and you see what you can do. Then you say, all right, my cops are still showing up tomorrow, but if you want to take a plea deal, I'll be there tomorrow. Or, you know, if you can get it done the day before trial, you're probably not getting a good plea deal because the cops are showing up and everybody's prepared. But like a week before trial, yeah, maybe you can get the old plea deal back and people will sort of, you know, take a plea deal. Or the other situation is when the government really has a bad case, like really bad, and they come in scrambling at the last minute. And I've had this happen many times. When you're coming in and they suddenly, your jail plea deal, they're like, oh, we'll give you 30 days in jail. 48 hours before trial, is your client entertaining a plea deal? I staffed this with my supervisor, right? My boss prosecutor. I staffed this with them, and they said that we can offer your client 15 days, but he has to pay a higher fine. Would he be willing to take that? No, get out of here. We'll see you in court. Okay, then the day before trial. Hey, just want to make sure that you're prepared for trial tomorrow. I've got my officers coming tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Then you might show up the day of, like literally the day of, and they'll say, hey, look, my witness is not going to be here. Or maybe they won't even say that. They'll just say, listen, will your guy take a probation deal? Okay, I'm here. We wanted 30 days or 6 months or whatever. Will he take a probation deal? And then at that point, you got to make a decision. You got to say, all right, look, we might be able to go and win this. And I've told a story, I think, for our members of where I did that once, right? They gave me a smoking deal on a domestic violence case. They botched the statute of limitations, and they were giving us like everything we wanted, but we pushed it and got the dismissal because we knew that they didn't have what they needed. So the point is, if they know their case is very weak, then they will come at the last minute and come skidding in there and start throwing stuff at you to try to get you to take it, because there is always a possibility that even if their case is weak, there's always a possibility that you just get a bad something, right? So if you can limit some of the externalities and take a deal that you know is certain, you'll do that, especially if the government is going to be giving you a ridiculous smoking deal like this one, where every single felony is dismissed, and the top line item, the big one that connected her to Trump, is not there. And the reason why I think they cobbled this together very quickly is because of this form, all right? This is the plea deal. Okay, so my friends, I've helped execute many, many plea deals, and when I was practicing with my law firm, we've done thousands of plea deals. And these plea deals, are generally like this, okay? They're all forms, it's very quick. In criminal courts, it happens rapidly. You go in there, you get charged with a domestic, or let's say a disorderly conduct charge when you're out in Old Town or 6th Street or wherever you're at, and you show up in court, you want to take this today, do a diversion deal, okay, fill this form out, don't take it over there, go take it over there. It's like, it's all scribbles, right? So this is normal in a regular case, but this is not a regular case. This is Sidney Powell's case. This is one of the nation's most preeminent cases right now. It's the RICO case involving Fani Willis and the former president, current presidential candidate running, probably might win. So the fact that they just cobbled this together, they did not even type it up, okay? In felony cases, you type up the plea deal, okay? You type it up. It's a felony, but they're dropping this from a felony down to a misdemeanor, so now they're using the felony, they're using the misdemeanor form. And there's some prosecutor who's back there who's just filling this out like with a ballpoint pen, and he's trying to like dig it in there, all right, for a Sidney Powell case. And I know this seems like maybe minor nonsense, but it's ridiculous. Don't get me wrong, you can do it this way. It's perfectly fine to do it this way. Like, it's valid, it's legitimate, but it's just like, it doesn't match the severity of the circumstance that they say that we're under. Wouldn't you want a little bit more clarity on this? Like, wouldn't you want them to put in writing what Sidney Powell can and cannot do? Like, look how vague this is. There's so much gray area here. Let's go through it. We see it says here right in front of Judge Scott McAfee, and in another segment, we'll listen to the whole thing and watch him go through this. But he says here, we've got a plea of guilty is in front of my courtroom. What is your legal name? Sidney Catherine Powell. At this time, are you under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or medication? No. How old are you? And these are questions that you'll get to make sure that this person who's taking the plea, and this is probably the judge writing this. I don't know if the judge is writing this and she signs it, or if they fill it out and the judge reviews it with her, right? Sometimes the judge will review it with her and say, is this your signature? You filled this out. Is this your signature? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna run through it with you. Do you agree with all of this? We'll see. We're gonna hear him do it in a minute. So here's what she says. How far did you go in school? Bachelor's, JD. Can you read and write English? Yes. Have you ever received psychiatric treatment or been to a mental hospital? If so, and where? No. Do you wish to plead guilty to the offense in this case? Yes. Got to do this stuff knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently. Do you understand you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to the charge? Yes, I do. And do you understand that by pleading guilty, you agree that you understand the nature of the charges? You know what's happening. You waive the right to a trial by jury. You waive the right to the presumption of innocence. You can't plead guilty if you're still going to allege you're innocent. You waive the right to confront witnesses. Nobody's going to be coming in to testify. You waive the right to subpoena witnesses since you're done. You also waive the right to testify and offer other evidence on your behalf since there will not be a trial. You don't get counsel during trial since there will not be a trial. And you waive the right not to testify against yourself. And that by pleading not guilty or remaining silent and not entering a plea, you could obtain a jury trial. So you're going to plead guilty, which means you have to say I'm guilty, and you can't turn around and invoke your right to remain silent if you're going to be in my courtroom pleading guilty. So the question is, do you understand that you may obtain a jury trial should you elect to plead not guilty? You could get one, but you're not going to, right? Yes. You acknowledge that you've entered this plea freely, voluntarily, and with a full understanding of all the rights that you are giving up? Yes. And do you acknowledge that no one has made any promises or threats to influence your decision to plead guilty here today? Yes. And so we've got a different change in the pen now. So my question is like, so who is writing this? Might be the judge. No. This is the prosecutor. I think prosecutor fills it out. Do you understand the prosecutor is recommending the following sentence? For counts 1 to 6, 12 months probation on each consecutively. So in criminal sentencing, we talk about 2 C words, concurrently versus consecutively. Consecutively is basically what it sounds like. One comes after the other. So every 12-month probation, which is what they're asking for, would be stacked one after the other. So you do year 1 for count 1. You do year 2 for count 2, and so on. So she could theoretically get up to 6 years probation if he maxes her out on that. $6,000 fine, so about $1,000 for each count. $2,700 in restitution. An apology letter. Truthful testimony at trial and other proceedings, which is like already a part of the deal, okay? Because she can't perjure herself. So I don't know what other proceedings that means, but yeah, I mean, if she's a witness, she can't perjure herself. So that's like stupid. Like, that's obviously there, but okay. She's not going to lie. I already wasn't going going to do that. No communication with other codees, witnesses, or media. That's an interesting one. So she can't communicate with co-defendants is what I think that says. It's a codee. Like, this is why this is so stupid. Codees, right? The typical sign for a defendant is this. Prosecutor is this, like the pi sign, and then this is defendant. So co-defendants, I think, or that could be a D. I don't know. Codees, witnesses, or the media. Now, there's a curious, like Sidney Powell doesn't have to talk to the other co-defendants, but if she wants to talk to them and they want to talk to her, it's interesting how they're going to limit her ability to do that. If I'm Donald Trump, I might want to say, well, I want to interview Sidney Powell. And they'll say, you can't do that. She's our witness. But not really, though. Like, she's not really your witness. She's a witness in the case, and Donald Trump has a right to interview a witness in the case. Now, she has a right maybe to refuse that, but Fani doesn't have the right to refuse that on her behalf. It's like making her a witness to them. So that's curious. We'll see what that turns into. Until all cases have been closed, then she can talk. And then they jammed this in here too. Full proffer. Okay, so a full proffer. So they'll give us their factual basis. They'll read something and provide documents. So this is my point. Like, this is very strange. Okay, if you think about this in any context, like if you were taking a plea deal, would you like to sign something that somebody scribbled in like this? Like, just ask yourself at home. Like, you're pleading guilty to 6 misdemeanor charges. Like, wouldn't you want a little bit more clarity about who does what and when and where all this goes and co-defendants and witnesses? Like, what do you mean? This is all just jumbled in. And I think it's because they're scrambling. And honestly, I think it's because they don't want a lot of clarity. Like, if Fani Willis wanted a lot of clarity in this, they would do it. But they're just trying to squeeze this through. Like, this is their doing. This is their offer. So do you understand that although this is a negotiated plea, the judge doesn't have to accept this? Yes. You understand that the maximum sentence you can receive, you've been advised the maximum sentence you can receive is 6 years. They put 47. They were going to write in maybe some months. And the minimum sentence you can receive is 0. Now, I think under the term of the law, I don't know if that was intending to be 6 years jail or 6 years probation, but we don't know. They moved on. Obviously, she didn't get jail. You understand, you acknowledge you've been advised that if you're not a citizen, this could have an impact on your immigration status. This goes on everyone by law. Do you acknowledge that you've been advised of a guilty plea, that it could be used to aggravate the punishment in another conviction? So we'll use this against you if you get in trouble again. And do you acknowledge you've had sufficient time to discuss this with your lawyer? Yeah. You understand that if you take this, there's not going to be a trial? Yeah. And that if you wish to seek relief for habeas corpus or file a petition for post-conviction relief or anything like that, you've got deadlines to follow? Yes. And Sidney Powell, to the charges, which we'll look at, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? She writes guilty, signed this October 19th. Sidney Powell signed here. And this is the signature of the attorney along with the defense attorney who signed off on it there. And the attorney certifying, I've read everything, I've explained everything, and they're done, right? So now let's look at the actual charges, because this is another short document. And as we explained already, same charges times 6, right? Same numbers right here all the way down. So we just follow them every single time. It's just the same thing times 6. Again, as we're playing along at home, we're asking about Venn diagrams. All of this is Sidney Powell conduct, but how does it spread out automatically and go over to Trump? Or can Sidney testify without implicating Trump at all, and the government would just come back and point to these crimes, not the original crimes, these. Here's the conduct. They say the undersigned prosecuting attorney, let's start with count 1. On behalf of the people, we charge Sidney Powell with conspiracy to commit intentional interference with performance of election duties. So conspiracy, but who's a part of the conspiracy here? Because this is not the RICO case, right? Not racketeering, which brings us into other people. Was Donald Trump a part of this conspiracy? I don't know. Here it's what it says. On the first day of this, unlawfully conspired to delay Misty Hampton from the performance of their duties by entering a contract with Sullivan Stickler, right? Same thing. Just like when you sign up for Netflix or something, right? It's a transaction. It's a contract. Then they say in count 2, they conspired by causing, after the contract was signed, that company to travel from Fulton County, Georgia, to look at ballots, right? But Sidney Powell is the person who did it. Sidney Powell signed the contract executed, and the company started taking action. Then the company traveled. Did Donald Trump, are they alleging Donald Trump caused Sidney Powell to sign that? I'm not seeing that in this charging document. We'll listen to what the soliloquy says and what the proffer says. Sidney Powell also then committed interference with the performance of duty again by paying. So it's the contract, it's the travel, it's the payment. Same thing here, saying that they knew that the purpose of using a computer, count 4, was to access voter data. So the same series of acts. Also examining voter data, which is is a separate offense, right? Voter data is different than other data. Data's data, but then voter data is very serious. And then lastly, same company, Sidney Powell entered into a contract and delivered payment. Okay, so once the work was done, entered into a payment. So here is what Sidney Powell is pled guilty to, okay? Hiring a third-party consultant to go look at some computer files. That's it. As a lawyer, she hired a third-party person to go look at some files, and Fani Willis charged her with crimes for that because maybe they accessed some records that they say that they shouldn't have, or it's interfering and delaying Misty Hampton. So it's just kind of delay of her, right? Like the intention of examining the voter data. It doesn't even say that they actually examined the voter data. So they intended to examine the voter data with knowledge that it was part of a conspiracy. Didn't actually look at it. And then sent a payment to it. And all of this was delaying this one person. Okay, so this is the election official, Misty Hampton, aka Emily Misty Hayes. She's really the only victim of these crimes here. I think she's in every single one of these. Misty Hayes right there, and Misty Hayes right there. So she's the victim. So it's all just basically, this company was just kind of slowing her down, actually. Like they're not even charged with looking at the records. It's just they were impeding her. It's basically nothing. It's like, I would imagine if you like bumped into somebody at an election, facility, and like you delayed, or you shouted at somebody or something like that, right? If you were like, give me my paper ballot, it's not printing, I want another one, and you hindered and delayed, then you could be charged with this. It's a misdemeanor. It is a total basic charge, and the big thing that stands out, my friends, no racketeering. And you can scroll through this whole document, as we just did, and there's not a single mention of Donald Trump in there. And it's about a lawyer who hired a third party that intended to go do some stuff, that delayed one election official, and it's now just misdemeanor. It's like nothing, okay? It's like a joke. Relative to what they originally charged her with, which was all sorts of 7 felonies, including one that implicated Donald Trump. So basically nothing there. And you can see here, the real question is going to be, what is the testimony and what does it sound like when Sidney Powell is called to the stand, if that happens and when. And so we'll cover the full court proceeding in the next segment. Check us out there if you want to continue on this. But my friends, we'll be following Big Fani's RICO case, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.